Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Ramadan 2024 series. For Muslims, right, the land of Palestine has a very special place in our heart. Allah has mentioned it so many times in the Quran and in different locations for different reasons. And it's mentioned as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned as well in Hadith. So the first ayah we got was Subhana alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa. Exalted is he who took his servant by night from al-masjid al-haram to al-masjid al-aqsa. The whole surroundings we have blessed. So we know that Allah has blessed this piece of land, right? So as our duty as Muslim as well to understand Allah has said this is holy piece of land, so we need to show our affection and love to this land as well. In another ayah, it is said Allah is talking to His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. قد نرى تقلب وجهك في السماء فلنولينك قبلة ترضاها فول وجهك شطر المسجد الحرام. So we know that Muslims early on used to pray towards Jerusalem, towards Al-Aqsa Mosque. Still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told His Prophet to change the direction of praying towards Al-Masjid al-Haram. We have certainly seen the turning of your face, O Muhammad, toward the heaven, and we will surely turn you to the Qibla with which you will be pleased. So that's the incidence of changing of Qibla, right? So this was our first Qibla as Muslims. Again, it's mentioned that this is a blessed and sacred piece of land. So Allah says, وَلِسُلَيْمَانَ الرِّيحَ عَاصِفَةً تَجْرِي بِأَمْرِهِ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا. And to Solomon we subjected the wind, blowing forcibly, proceeding by his command toward the land which we had blessed. Again, it's mentioned in another location, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So this land Allah has blessed. Again, it's mentioned so many times in the Quran. And Prophet Muhammad will mention as well in a number of hadith we'll be talking about. So this piece of land is very holy to us. We need to show our love and affection. This is not a cause for Palestinians. It's not a cause for the Arabs. It's part of our faith. So this piece of land belongs to us and we belong to it as well. Let's see what Muhammad said about the land of Palestine. So do not undertake a journey to visit any mosque, but three mosques. The Mosque of Mine, Masjid al-Nabawi, the Mosque of Masjid al-Haram, and the Mosque of Aqsa Mosque. So only three mosques that actually you're allowed to go travel to visit. That's one of them. Another hadith is prayer in Mecca is worth 100,000 times reward. A prayer in Masjid in Medina is worth 1,000 times more, and a prayer in Aqsa Sanctuary, Al-Aqsa Mosque, is worth 500 times more reward than anywhere else. Another hadith, Abu Dhar, narrated by Abu Dhar and Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he asked him, "O Messenger of Allah, which mosque was first built on the surface of earth?" He said, "Al-Masjid al-Haram in Mecca." And then which was built next? He replied, "The Mosque of Al-Aqsa Mosque." And what is the period between the two? 40 years. There are multiple narrations for who actually built the Aqsa Mosque. So one of the most common narration is that both houses were first built by Prophet Adam. So it is said that Adam alayhi salam has built Al-Kaaba, and then 40 years later he built Al-Aqsa Mosque. Why should we learn about Palestine? So as we mentioned, this is where the Aqsa Mosque is, right? It was mentioned multiple times in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam hadith, the Quran. That was our first Qibla as well, right? We know that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was taken, Rihlat al-Isra. Isra means the journey that was done by night, right? When he's taken to Al-Aqsa Mosque, he was the imam he prayed with other prophets and messengers, and this all happened in that holy site. But it all happened in Aqsa Mosque. We talked about, yes, this is the nation of the Isra journey. It's mentioned in the Quran that this piece of land is the blessed and sacred land, and we believe as Muslims that this the land of resurrection. So after everybody dies, we're going to be resurrected, right? And everybody will be called back to life, will be resurrected in this holy piece of land, getting ready for Judgment Day. Most importantly, actually not that point, but we know that battles happened there as well. The very famous battles of Hattin, the one the Muslims defeated the Crusaders, Ain Jalut, when Muslims defeated the Mongols, and the final battle at the before the Judgment Day. So we as Muslims believe that Muslims will fight against under the leadership of Al-Mahdi and Jesus Christ, or Jesus, right, against the army of Antichrist and Masih al-Dajjal, and this will happen at the end of times. But most importantly, it's a matter of faith. So the Jewish over there, or the Jewish people, it's part of their faith that this is a holy land for them. The same thing should go for Muslims, right? So it's part of our faith. This is where our Prophet went. This is how, this Rihlat al-Isra took place. We know that Allah mentioned it so many times. It has to be part of us all. Again, I'm repeating that. It's not a Palestinian issue. It's not Arabs issue. For each Muslim, this is a part of your faith and we need to defend it. So there was just a quick introduction before we start our lecture. So when you hear the Masjid al-Aqsa, what do we mean by that? So we call this whole structure al-Masjid al-Aqsa, right? And sometimes you call Haram al-Sharif. So this is the original mosque. Al-Masjid al-Qibli, you see the silver dome. I know this is not the best picture in terms of clarity, but anyway, the silver dome, this is the Masjid al-Qibli, this is the original mosque. And its yard, this is the Dome of the Rock. And that rock is where Muhammad started his Mi'raj trip. He ascended to heaven. And then later in the Umayyad period, like we talked last year, it was built the Dome of the Rock Mosque in this sanctuary. The other thing I want you to know about is that this wall is called Buraq Wall. So Muhammad when he usriya bihi from Mecca to Al-Aqsa Mosque, riding a creature, or some creatures took him over from Mecca to Medina, he stopped there, and this is why we believe that was this is called Burak Wall. If you ever, or some of you who visited Jerusalem will know that this Burak Wall is a major site of conflict. So, for example, for the Jews, they think it is part of the Temple of Solomon. We'll talk about that later on in the slide. So they call it the Wailing Wall. The name that they have it on right now is called the Western Wall. So not to make anybody angry, so they put the Western Wall. But for us, we know it's the Burak Wall. For the Jews, called the Wailing Wall. But it's all the same in terms of it's one wall, just different faith call it different names. So history repeats itself. If you all remember, for those of you who attended last year, remember when we talked about Al-Andalus, great civilization, Muslims were there for 800 years. If you ask any of the kids or any of you, of the younger ones, we ask about this piece of land, they will tell you Spain and Portugal, they may tell you like Cristiano Ronaldo, right? So Muslims lived there for almost 800 years. And nobody thinks it's a Muslim land anymore. So that's what we're afraid of, that history repeats itself. So let's look at what happened. In Andalus, Muslims lived in Spain, Portugal, parts of France, parts of Italy, parts of Switzerland. But what happened, the way it happens is fights were going on, wars going on. You slowly kill the inhabitants of the land, and from fear, people starts moving out, so they get displaced. Then you confiscate. Confiscate means I'm taking that property without approval. If I'm the ruler, I can take your property without approval. It's called confiscation. Dispossession meaning I'm taking your property, taking your ownership of that property. You're not the owner anymore. I can give it to anyone. This is dispossession. So confiscation and dispossession. And then in this piece of land that I confiscated or dispossessed, I'll create settlements for my people. And this is exactly what happened in Andalus. And slowly, this has been happening, over a long period of time until the whole inhabitants have been replaced. Muslims have been kicked out. Where else in history have you seen that? In the United States here and part of Canada as well. So the colonizers from Europe settled at the eastern coast where the native tribes have been living there for a long period of time before that. And slowly the white colonizer start colonizing and taking over this land until the Native Americans have been kicked out, right? This is what happened. Again, this is happening. This is a map before 1946. All this green piece of land we think is Palestine. These white dots are the Jewish settlements that were there in 1946. Even before that, it was even less. So let's see what happened. 1947, United Nations divided the land between the minority of Jewish people, and this piece of land was divided, and they gave them almost 56% of the land of Palestine. And then later on, the new state of Israel started taking over more and more piece of land, and you see the Palestinian land, how it was and how it become. And look, this picture is in 2012. Even this is the West Bank, right? Within the West Bank, they created settlements, so even the West Bank, it become divided. It's not one piece even anymore. So that's what I mean. History repeats itself. We saw it in Andalus. We saw it in the United States. That's what we're afraid it might happen in Palestine as well. So now we're going to start the lecture. There was all introduction. Really quick, we'll start with history of Palestine. So the oldest city of Earth was 10,000 years ago. Remnants was discovered, or ruins were discovered in the city of Jericho. Jericho is Ariha as the name. And if you see it here on the map, it's just above Jerusalem or Quds. And the original inhabitants were the Canaanites, or the people of Canaan, and the Yabusiyin, or the Jebusites. You need to know about the Canaanites. It was the most famous inhabitants used to live over there. And they're originally from Arabia. So they moved from Arabia almost 2500 BC. So those were the original inhabitants of Palestine. We'll talk about the genes of the current inhabitants, but shortly we'll talk about that. And this piece of land was very strategic. Why? We have the Egyptian kingdom and we have the Mesopotamian civilizations happening there. So this was the most strategic trading route. So trades have been going on through this piece of land and to Europe as well. So that's why each civilization wanted to put hand control this piece of land. So if we go in history, the most remote that we know incidents that actually took place in this location was Prophet Ibrahim. So Prophet Ibrahim, after was saved from the fire, king of Iraq, he was in the city of Ur. Sorry, I didn't find an English one to use, but anyway, he was kicked up from a city named Ur in Iraq. And he moved all the way with his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot, and they stay in the land of Palestine. Shortly after, Sayyidina Ibrahim moves over to Egypt, where he gets married to a new wife, Hajar, together with Sayyidah Sarah, Sayyidah Hajar together, and then Sayyidah Hajar, together with Sayyidina Ibrahim, goes back, and then all the way down to Mecca with their newborn Ismail, his firstborn. When we know the story that Ibrahim salam left them over there, and he went back to Khalid. So what happened after? We know the story after that, the story that the angels paid him a visit, and he will be having a new son, another son named Ishaq. So Sayyidina Ibrahim over there will get his second son, Ishaq. After his second Ishaq grows, he will have a new child named Yaqub. Right? Yaqub is the most prominent figure in all history regarding the issue of Palestine. This is where the name Israel shows up. So that's another name for Sayyidina Yaqub, Israel. So when you hear the word Israel, Israel is even the current state of Israel. They took their name from Sayyidina Yaqub or Jacob. His name was Israel. Now, that being said, talking about Jacob or Sayyidina Yaqub, our versions are different. So we believe in him as an honorable, respectable prophet, and we believe in only Allah's prophets, right? In the Bible or the Old Testament, the way he's being portrayed is different. So he was not an honest person. Actually, he stole the prophethood from his brother. He used his short-sightedness of Sayyidina Ishaq, and he stole this blessing that Sayyidina Ishaq was going to give his brother. Another narration over there, it is said that Sayyidina Yaqub fought with Allah, with the Lord, that's what they say. And he defeated him even. And for that the prophethood will stay in his children. So the reason I'm telling you this story, just to compare the virgins, how we see the prophets of Bani Israel compared how others are being portrayed in the Torah or the Bible or the Old Testament. I mean, regarding the historical references, by the way, so it's very difficult to find accurate historical records. So that's why we're using holy books as references in our stories, especially that distant in history. So we believe Prophet Ibrahim lived for almost 170 years, 175 years, and he got a cave for himself where he and his family are going to be buried. And above of this cave, this Ibrahimi mosque is built. And if you ever visit this mosque in there, you can see this tomb for Sayyidina Ibrahim and Sayyidina Ishaq and his wife Rifqa. Another one's not in the picture for Sayyidina Yaqub as well. Now, Sayyidina Yaqub or Israel, right, will have children. That's why Allah calls them Bani Israel, the children of Israel. In some other narration of the Quran, you can hear the word Al-Asba. And in the Western literature, it's called Al-Israelite, the Israelites. So we have 12 sons of Jacob, the constitutes the 12 tribes. Of course, one of which will be Sayyidina Yusuf, right? While this is always happening, let's get to the origin of the name of Palestine. So how did it happen? So we have some tribes living in Crete or moved to Crete called the Philistines, the city that we used to stay in or the place they used to live in called Pelest. So they were called the Philistines. So they moved from Crete all the way to Egypt. They fought the Egyptians. They tried to invade, they could not. However, they stayed in the land of Palestine. That happened almost 1200 BC. So they mixed with the people of Canaan. They even built city there. These are the people who built the cities of Gaza and Asqalan and Lud, and they stayed ever since over there. However, they mixed with the Canaanites, with the people of Canaan. So that's why when you look at the genes for the modern Palestinians, you'll find their genes are 85% Canaanite, of Canaan, right? So that's how the name of Palestine came to existence from Palestinian tribes. Okay. So back to our Jewish history. So we talked about Sayyidina Yaqub, his 12 sons, and we know the story of Sayyidina Yusuf thrown in a well, taken by a caravan all the way to Egypt. Now, from a historical context, which might be, it's a gray zone, right? Who was ruling Egypt at that time? So one of the narrations is, at that time, the Hyksos, which are tribes that used to be in the Levant and then in Palestine, actually took power in Egypt. So they rule. At that time, Sayyidina Yusuf is in Egypt back then, and he become, and we know the stories of Sayyidina Yusuf over there, and he grows to become a minister of granaries. That's what we think. Like granaries, that he's responsible for the grains or giving the, different grains to the people. In other narrations, they think it's prime minister or maybe even the ruler. We don't know exactly. However, he's in control. He's in power. Now, we know about the dream or ru'ya that Sayyidina Yusuf had, and the famine hits Egypt. But the Egyptians are ready because they had Sayyidina Yusuf take care of them. However, the famine hits the Levant, or the land of Palestine as well. So we know the story, and they come to Egypt. Sayyidina Yusuf calls for his family, brothers, to come over, and they come over to Egypt, and they think it's almost 72 people that moved, including Sayyidina Yaqub and his 12 children and their children. We'll stop here for a second. So how long did they live in the land of Canaan, or the land of Palestine, right? Originally the name of Canaan. So Sayyidina Ibrahim moved over there, he dies over there. And then Sayyidina Ishaq born, lives, and dies there. Sayyidina Yaqub born, but then moves to Egypt. So the only one generation that lived fully in the land of Canaan so far is only Sayyidina Ishaq. Sayyidina Ibrahim was an immigrant. Sayyidina Yaqub will leave to Egypt. We talk about historical records. We don't have accurate historical records. However, the story of the famine was encrypted on a very big piece of stone that's present in the city of Aswan in Egypt. So I'm talking about the conflicts that you can hear, and the story of the famine is recorded in Egypt on these giant rocks in Aswan. Now, we talked that Sayyidina Yusuf came to Egypt most likely during the era of Hyksos. Hyksos were the ruling power, ruling over Egyptians, and they were not very good to the Egyptians. However, 150 years later, the Egyptians take over and they conquer the Hyksos. And guess what? The Jews allied with the wrong party, right? So they allied with Hyksos, and they are enslaved. So that's one of the reasons why the Jews were enslaved in Egypt, and why did the pharaohs kill their, children and enslaved their people, women, and so on and so forth. So they live in this state until Allah allows Sayyidina Musa to come. So Sayyidina Musa comes, and we know his story with the 9 ayahs or the 9 miracles he performed, and we know what happened. So the Exodus is the trip leaving Egypt. So he uses his staff, the sea breaks into 2, and he takes his people out. So where did this happen? Happen here. So when you look at the Red Sea, we have the Gulf of Suez, the Gulf of Aqaba. So this happened here. So the Bani Israel actually leaves Egypt, moves into the Sinai Desert. We're going to stay there for a long period of time. Let's see what happened over there. So after the Exodus, which happened almost 1300 BC, and again, the Exodus means exiting Egypt. So ever hear the word Exodus, that's what it means. So we know about the story of the al-manna was-salwa, right? So they were complaining. So they were given al-manna, which is equivalent to honey, but comes from plants. Quails, which is like birds, they were eating. They're complaining to Prophet Musa, we need to eat different things, we need different vegetables, and so they're always complaining. We know that Sayyidina Musa went to meet Allah on top of the mountain, and he left them. He's supposed to leave for 30 days, but he leaves them for 40 days. When they think he's not coming back, they took the jewelry they took from the Egyptians, and they made this golden calf. They built a golden calf. That's Al-Samiri built that for them, and they worship that. We're not going to details on in the stories. I'm just giving you an example what happened after the Exodus. And another miracle that happened that because they said we want to see Allah Jahara, we want to see Allah with our own eyes. The mountain was raised above them. Jabal Tur was taken up. Some of them dies and gets resurrected. So, and then Allah tells Musa to tell them to go take your people to fight, to go to the Holy Land. So how do they reply? They said, قالوا يا موسى إنا لن ندخلها أبدا ما داموا فيها فاذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنها هنا قاعدون. They said, oh Moses, we're not going to enter it ever. As long as they stay in it. Go, you and your Lord, go fight them. We are here staying. So they refused. So after all the miracles they've seen, after everything that happened in the desert of Sinai, they said, we are not going to fight with you. You and Allah go fight together. So Allah punished them and let them stay in the Sinai desert for 40 years. So they call this era the wilderness. So they keep wandering around, they cannot get out, and they stayed there. And even Sayyidina Musa dies over there. So he doesn't live in long enough to see the Holy Land. Now, a new prophet shows up in the picture. So Yusha ibn Nun, you all heard his story when he was in Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina al-Khidr, when Sayyidina Musa had a young boy helping him during the trip before he met Sayyidina al-Khidr. So that boy was, we think it's Yusha ibn Nun. Again, there are multiple interpretations, but one of famous one that the young boy was Yusha ibn Nun. So Sayyidina Yusha ibn Nun, we're talking about 1250 BC. He's the one who unites the tribes of Israel, of Bani Israel, and come together, okay, let's fight those people you were afraid to fight before. And those people, they were called the giants or the Amalekites. So the reason I put the old names Amalekites because we hear this in the news nowadays a lot. So, and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned Yusha ibn Nun. He says, the sun has never stopped for any man besides Yusha ibn Nun. So the sun has never stopped for any man besides Yusha ibn Nun because when he wanted to conquer Beit al-Maqdis. So the story goes that Yusha ibn Nun with Bani Israel were fighting the Amalekites on a Friday, and then the sun is going to set. And on Saturday, the Jews are not supposed to work. Of course, they're not supposed to fight either. So he prays to Allah that if he can stop the sun from sunsetting so they can finish. Otherwise, the Amalekites will go and regroup so they can fight them on Sunday. So Allah listens to him, sun setting, stop. Now, this is from the Jewish, from the Old Testament. What they believe that Allah has told Yusha to do. Now go attack the Amalekites, the giants, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Don't spare them. Put to death men, women, children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys. Compare this brutality to what Muhammad ﷺ told, the Muslims, what are they supposed to do during the fight, during their battles. Don't injure an old man, a woman, a child, cattle, or plants. And again, why am I using this verse from the Holy Scriptures? Because that's what's happening right now. In Israel, they look at the Palestinians, they look at them, if the Lord allowed them to do this in the past, they can do this again. And they look at them, even the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, he mentioned the Amalekites in his speeches, and that, in the Holy Book, said they can destroy them, infants, cows, everything. So what happened after is Yusha ibn Nun, he defeats the Amalekites, they never get united, they divided back into tribes, and they keep fighting each other. And they're misbehaving, not following what Allah has told them, and Allah sends them numerous prophets. And when you have numerous prophets, this doesn't mean that you're pious. Actually, you need more guidance. Like I sent you more than prophet and you didn't hear them, didn't listen to them. And actually, it's from biblical or from the Quran that they killed the prophets. So Allah punished them, the Bani Israel, and they send the Amalekites over again, and the Amalekites will take over the cities that they conquered before. And this picture, for the older ones, this is Samson and Delilah. This is in the literature. You hear it from European literature. This happened at the era of Judge. So now, they're united, the Amalekites take over. The Amalekites takes over the Ark of the Covenant. So what's the Ark of the Covenant, by the way? Ark of the Covenant is a box that the tablets, the scriptures that came from Allah gave to Moses, live up there. The staff of Moses, staff like the stick of Moses, and the clothes of Sayyidina Musa and Harun, some other holy scriptures were left over there. And this picture, of course, for the older ones who watching Jones movie, you can relate. Anyway, this is actually in the pictures and from the Jewish resources as well. So anyway, Amalekites take over the Ark of Covenant. Now, so they go over to the prophet, ask them, we're very weak, we're dispersed, find us a king, we can all unite under him, and we're going to fight. And he says, okay, I'm going to choose one, but are you going to follow? And he chooses a shepherd, that shepherd named Talut. So they go tell him, how are we going to follow a shepherd? He's not even, hasn't done any royal blood. Show us a sign that he is actually the right one. So Allah brings back the Ark of Covenant carried by angels back to them. This will be the sign of his kingdom. So that's why when you look in some of the resources, when they depicting like drawing the Ark of Covenant, they put that the wings over there resembling the angels. So now we have a new king, King Talut, the first king, and he takes his Bani Israel crossing over the river, and Allah is testing them. Crossing the river, asking them only take one scoop of water and drink only one. Don't drink more than that. Most of them don't follow, so only few believers cross over with him, and they say, "La taqata lana al-yawm bil-jalut wa junudihi." Today we cannot fight Jalut. And that's one if he every soul or show is King Talut. So he asked them, "Who's gonna fight? And I'm gonna make him marry my daughter. Who's gonna fight? And he will be even my success." We have the giants, everybody well equipped, have the tanks, have everything, and this young young boy just throwing a rock. I don't see any picture resembling the story of David or Sayyidina Dawood and Jalut more than this picture. And Allah, inshallah, will give them all victory. So now we have a new king. We have Sayyidina Dawood. He's a prophet and a king, prophetic king, right? He takes over the land. This is the land of Palestine. He creates the kingdom of Israel, right? And it's actually over the 74% of the current land. So if you look at the state of Israel right now compared to the kingdom of Israel back then, it's smaller. It's 74% of the land. And Sayyidina Dawood as well was given a holy book to rule his people, and the holy book called as Zabur, or the Psalms in English. ربك أعلم بمن في السماوات والأرض ولقد فضلنا بعض النبيين على بعض وآتينا داوود زبورا. And your Lord is most knowing, whoever is in the heavens and earth, and we have made some of the prophets exceed others. And to David we gave the book of Psalms, or the Zabur. So now we have a new kingdom, kingdom of Israel. So now we're talking about 1000 BC. Sayyidina Dawood dies, comes after Prophet Sulaiman. Prophet Sulaiman, he made a supplication or dua to Allah, and he said, رب اغفر لي وهب لي ملكا لا ينبغي لأحد من بعدي إنك أنت الوهاب. My Lord, forgive me and grant me a kingdom such as will not belong to anyone after me. Indeed, you are the bestower. And we've never heard of a kingdom like the kingdom of Sayyidina Sulaiman. وحشر لسليمان جنوده من الجن والإنس والطير فهم يوزعون. And his hosts of the jinn and the men and the birds were gathered to him, and they were formed into groups. أن يعملون له ما يشاء من محاريب وتماثيل وجفان كالجواب وقدور راسيات اعملوا آل داود شكرا وقليلا من عبادي الشكور. They made for him what he willed of elevated chambers, patios, balls like reservoirs, and stationary kettles. ولسليمان الريح غدوها شهرا روحوها شهر وأسلنا له عين القط ومن الجن من يعمل بين يديه بإذن ربه. And to Solomon we subjected the wind. Its morning journey lasted a month, and its afternoon journey lasted a month, and we made flow for him of a spring of liquid copper. And among the jinn were those who worked for him by the permission of his Lord. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is, even in the Quran, Allah gives us examples that we've never heard of. He was a mighty king who ruled over the land. However, he made a structure that actually is going quite controversial. We all hear about the Temple of Solomon or Temple of Sulaiman. So he built a house for God, and he called it the Temple of Sulaiman. So this is the first time we're going to hear about the Masons. So Masons mean builders. So that's the first time he has a team of builders who actually built the Temple of Sulaiman. And again, this is from the biblical resources. We don't have any details on the Quran, or nothing is actually in recorded history. It's all from the biblical resources. So Masons, they built it over him, and this is where you start hearing about the Freemasons, and we still have organizations named after them. And they put the Ark of Covenant in there. Now, the location is very controversial, but before we go into location, I want to show you some of the pictures that depicted or actually portrayed for this temple. So you'll find in the Bible controversial verses, some of which will say, okay, it's made totally of pure gold. Some would say, some other location or site or verse say it's made of copper, and on another verse said it's made of stone. So we don't know which one. Was it really made of gold? We don't know. But anyway, we know it was a big structure. At least this is what we, from the different resources, big structure was built over time. Why is this important? In the Jewish faith, they want to resurrect, or they want to build again the Temple of Sulaiman. Now, some far-right Israeli groups call for dismantling the Dome of Rock on Jerusalem Day. So they want to destroy the Dome of Rock, and they take over this noble sanctuary, Al-Haram al-Sharif, and they build the Temple of Sulaiman. And this used to be far-right claim, but now is going over to be mainstream. So we see people building Temple of Sulaiman, what do you call, like miniature structures, and they're telling their kids, one day we're going to destroy the Aqsa Mosque and we're going to build that. Even the Prime Minister and his cabinet met once under ongoing excavations under the Aqsa Mosque, by the way, and they're looking for any sign of Temple of Sulaiman, but they couldn't find any. However, they keep digging and digging, and even the Prime Minister and his cabinet had a meeting under the Aqsa Mosque one day just to show us we're in control, we do whatever we want. And of course, this is insulting millions of billions of Muslims around the world. So anyway, we have a united kingdom. We know about Prophet Sulaiman. So Sulaiman dies, the kingdom after him goes over to his son. However, and afterwards the kingdom gets divided. So the united kingdom only lasted for 90 years. Now we have two kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel, the capital of Samaria, the kingdom of Judah and Jerusalem. So we have two smaller kingdoms, and guess what? They're fighting amongst each other. What happened when you're weakened, when you're weak, when you cannot defend yourself, when you fight with your brothers, have new masters sent over to you. So we have the Assyrians starting to take over. They come from Mesopotamia, which is here in Iraq. So they take over, their empire grows and take over the whole Palestine land. When you hear about the Assyrians, this is the very famous structure from the Assyrians, the bull with wings, man face. However, they take control for a short period of time. Babylonians show up next, and they took over a vast landscape. They control more countries, and they took over. And this is the Gate of Ishtar. This is a very famous Babylonian structure, just that way. So is it mentioned in the Quran that the kingdom of Israel is going to be destroyed? وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ فِي الكِّتَابِ لَتُفْسِدُنَّ مَرَّتَيْنِ وَلَتَعْلُنَّ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا. When we declare to the children of Israel in the scripture, twice you will spread corruption in the land and become highly arrogant. فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا. When the first of these warnings was fulfilled, we sent against you servants of ours with great force, and they ravaged your homes. The warning was fulfilled. One of the narrations is that the first destruction that this ayah is talking about was the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. This is the way, I know it's a long name, Nebuchadnezzar is an English way of saying it, Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar, Babylonian king, everything. So he destroys the temple. They said not a stone over the other. He takes most of the Jewish into Babylonia as captives. We're going to know about details about that in the next lecture tomorrow by Dr. Saleh. However, what is important to know that the first temple destruction happened in 586 BC. It happened in there. And then when they moved over to Babylonia, the Torah compilation or the Torah was written for the first time. So Torah, 700 years between when Torah was revealed to Moses, Sayyidina Musa. Let's remember we talked about 1300 BC, and now we're actually in the 500. So it was never written. It was all gone orally or verbally. It was never compiled, never put together until they went into the Babylonian captivity. So why is this important? Compare this to Islam. The Quran was written during the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? On leather, on bones, on whatever it was written on. And was first compiled means they brought them together during the era of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh. Next time, Dr. Saleh will tell us about the 12 tribes, how 10 of them are lost, and we only have 2 tribes left. So I think this is the end of my presentation. And if anybody has questions, please go ahead. I'm preparing the Kahoot for the young ones if they want to play.